Hello everyone and welcome back. So, we are continuing on chapter 5 of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. So, what have we learned today? First things first, Tyson is a Cyclops. Second thing second, Argus is fired and there's a new guy named Tantalus and Chiron is getting fired. And what else? Oh yeah, you should never ever try to ride the Grey Sister taxi. Anyway, so we are on chapter 5. So get comfortable, get anything you need, water, drinks. Oh, I also got my tea here. Nice. Food, whatever. If you're doing something while listening, good luck, and we are diving right back in to chapter 5. I get a new cabin mate. Ever come home and find your room messed up, like some helpful person? Hi, Mom. Have tried to clean it, and suddenly you couldn't find anything? And even if nothing is missing, you get a creepy feeling like somebody's been looking through your private stuff and dusting everything with lemon furniture polish. That's kind of the way I felt seeing Camp Half-Blood again. On the surface, things didn't look all that different. The big house was still there with its blue gabled roof and its gray-brown porch. The strawberry fields baked in the sun. The same white-column Greek buildings were scattered around the valley. Amphitheater, the combat arena, the dining pavilion overlooking Long Island Sound. And nestled between the woods and the creek were the same cabins, a crazy assortment of 12 buildings, each representing a different Olympian god. But there was an air of danger now. You could tell something was wrong. Instead of playing volleyball in the sandpit, counselors and satyrs were stockpiling weapons in the tool shed. Dryad, armed with bows and arrows, stalked nervously at the edge of the woods. The forest looked sticky, the grass in the meadow was pale yellow, and the fire marks on Half-Blood Hill stood out like ugly scars. Somebody had messed up my favorite place in the world, and I was not, well, a happy camper. As we made our way to the big house, I recognized a lot of kids from last summer. Nobody stopped to talk. Nobody said, "Welcome back." Some did double takes when they saw Tyson, but most just walked grimly past and carried on their duties, running messages, starting swords to sharpen on the grinding wheel. The camp felt like a military school, and believe me, I know. I'd been kicked out of a couple. None of that mattered to Tyson. He was absolutely fascinated by everything he saw. "What's that?" he gasped. "The stable for the Pegasi," I said. "The winged horses." "What's that?" Those are the toilets." "What's that?" "The cabin for the campers. If they don't know who your Olympian parent is, they put you in the Hermes cabin, that brown one over there, until you're determined. Then, once they know, they put you in your dad's or mom's group." He looked at me, "You have a cabin?" "Number 3. I pointed to a low gray building made of sea stone. "You live with friends in the cabin?" No, just me." I didn't feel like explaining the embarrassing truth. I was the only one who stayed in that cabin because I wasn't supposed to be alive. The big 3 gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, had made a pact after World War II not to have any more children with mortals. We were more powerful than regular Half-Bloods. We were too unpredictable. When we got mad, we tended to cause problems, like World War II, for instance. The big 3 pact had only been broken twice. One when Zeus sired Thalia, once when Poseidon sired me. Neither of us should have been born. Thalia had got herself turned into a pine tree when she was 12. Me, well, I was doing my best not to follow her example. I had nightmares about what Poseidon might turn me into if I were even ever on the verge of death. Plankton, maybe, or a floating patch of kelp. When we got to the big house, we found Carmen in his apartment, listening to his favorite 1960s lounge music. While he packed his saddlebags, I guess I should mention, Chiron is a centaur. From the waist up, he looks like a regular middle-aged guy with curly brown hair and a strangely beard. From the waist down, he's a white stallion. He can pass for human by compacting his lower half into a magic wheelchair. In fact, he would pass himself as my Latin teacher during my 6th grade year, but most of the time, if the ceiling was high enough, he prefers hanging out in full center form. As soon as we saw him, Tyson froze. "Pony!" he cried in total rapture. Karen turned, looking offended. "I beg your pardon?" Annabeth ran up to him and hugged him. "Karen, what's happening? You're not leaving?" Her voice was shaky. Karen was like a second father to her. Karen ruffled her hair and gave her a kindly smile. "Hello, child. And Percy, my goodness, you've grown over the year." I swallowed. "Clarice said you were fired." Karen's eyes glinting with dark humor. "Ah, well, somebody had to take the blame. Lord Zeus was most upset. The tree he's creating for the spirit of his daughter poisoned. Mr. D had to punish someone." "That's himself, you mean?" I growled. Just the thought of the camp director, Mr. D, made me angry. "But this is crazy!" Annabeth cried. "Karen, you couldn't have done anything to do with the poisoning Talia's tree." Nevertheless, Karen sighed. "Some of the Olympus do not trust me now, under the circumstances." "What circumstances?" I asked. Karen's face darkened. He stuffed the Latin-English dictionary into his saddlebags, while the Frank Sinatra music oozed from the boombox. Tyson was still staring at Karen in amazement. He whimpered like he wanted to pat Karen's flag, but he was afraid to come closer. "Pony?" Karen sniffed. "My dear young Cyclops, I'm a centaur." "Karen," I said, "what about the tree? What happened?" He shook his head sadly. "The poison used on Talia's pine tree is something from the underworld, Percy. Some venom even I have never seen. It must have come from the monster quite deep in the pits of Tartarus. Then we know who's responsible. Do not invoke the Titan Lord's name, Percy. Especially not here. Not now." "But last summer he tried to cause a civil war in Olympus. This has to be his idea. He'd get Luke to do it. The traitor." "Perhaps," Karen said. "But I fear that I am being held responsible because I did not prevent it and I cannot cure it. The tree has only a few weeks of life unless—" "Unless what?" Annabeth asked. "No," Karen said. "A foolish thought. The whole valley is feeling the shock of the poison. The magical borders are deteriorating. The camp itself is dying. Only one source of magic would be strong enough to reverse the What is happening? To reverse the poison, and it was lost centuries ago. What is it? I asked. We'll go find it. Carmen closed his saddlebag. He pressed the stop button on his boombox. Then he turned and rested his hand on my shoulder, looking me straight in the eyes. "Percy, you must promise me that you will not act rashly. I told your mother I did not want you to come here at all this summer. It's much too dangerous. But now that you are here, stay here. Train hard, learn how to fight, but do not leave." "Why?" I asked. "I want to do something. I can't just let the borders fail. The camp will be overrun by monsters," Carmen said. "Yes, I fear so. But you must not let yourself be baited into hasty actions. This could be a trap of the Titan Lord. Remember last summer, he almost took your life." It was true, but still, I wanted to help so badly. I also wanted to make Kronos pay. I mean, you think the Titan Lord would have learned his lesson aeons ago when he was overrun by the gods? You'd think getting chopped into a million pieces and cast into the darkest part of the underworld would give him a subtle clue that nobody wanted him around. But no. Because he was immortal, he was still alive down there. suffering eternal pain, hungering to return and take revenge on Olympus. He couldn't act on his own, but he was great at twisting the minds of mortals, and even gods to do his dirty work. The poisoning had to be his idea. Who else would be so low as to attack Thalia's tree, the only thing left of a hero who'd given her life to save her friends? Anna was trying hard not to cry. Karen brushed a tear from her cheek. "Stay with Percy, child," he told her. "Keep him safe. The prophecy. Remember it." "I will." I said, "Would this be the super dangerous prophecy that has me in it, but the gods have forbidden me to tell me about it?" Nobody answered. "Right," I muttered. "Just checking." "Karen," Annabeth said, "you told me the gods made you immortal only so long as you were needed to train heroes. If they dismiss you from camp—" "Swear you will do your best to keep Percy from danger," he insisted. "Swear upon the river Styx." I swear it upon the river Styx," Annabeth said. Thunder rumbled outside. "Very well," Karen said. He seemed to relax just a little. "Perhaps my name will be cleared and I shall return. Until then, I'll go to visit my kinsmen in the Everglades. It's possible they know of some cure for the poisoning tree that I have forgotten. In any event, I will stay in exile until this matter is resolved, one way or another." Annabeth stiffened a sob. Karen patted her shoulder awkwardly. "There now, child. I must entrust your safety to Mr. Dean, the new activities director. We must hope. Well, perhaps they won't destroy the camp quite as quick as I fear." "Who is this Tantalus guy anyway?" I demanded. "Where does he get off taking your job?" A conch horn blew across the valley. I hadn't realized how late it was. It was time for the campers to assemble for dinner. "Go," Karen said. "You will meet him at the pavilion. I will contact your mother, Percy, and let her know you're safe. No doubt she'll be worried by now. Just remember my warning. You are in grave danger. Do not think for a moment that the Titan Lord has forgotten you." Just a sec. Just a little bit of tea. Where was I? Oh, here. With that, he clocked out the apartment and down the hall, Tyson calling after him, "Pony, don't go!" I realized I'd forgotten to tell Karen about my dream of Grover. Now it was too late. The best teacher I'd ever had was gone, maybe for good. Tyson started bawling almost as bad as Annabeth. I tried to tell them that things would be okay, but I didn't believe it. The sun was settling behind the dining pavilion. As the campers came up from their cabins, we stood in the shadow of a marble column and watched them fill in. Annabeth was pretty shaken up, but she promised she'd talk to us later. Then she went off to join her siblings from the Athena cabin. A dozen boys and girls with blonde hair and gray eyes like hers. Annabeth wasn't the oldest, but she had been to camp more summers than just about anyone. You could tell that by looking at her camp necklace, one bead for every summer, and Annabeth had 6. No one questioned her right to lead the line. Next came Clarice, leading the Ares cabin. She had one arm in a sling and a nasty-looking gash on her cheek, but otherwise her encounter with the bronze bulls didn't seem to faze her. Someone had tapped a piece of paper on her bag that said, "You move, girl!" but nobody in her cabin was bothering to tell her about it. After the Ares kids came the Hephaestus cabin, 6 guys led by Charles Beckendorf, a big 15-year-old African-American kid who had hands the size of catcher's mitts and a face that was hard and squinty from looking into blacksmith's forge all day. He was nice enough once you got to know him, but no one ever called him Charlie, or Chuck, or Charles. Most just called him Beckendorf. Rumor was he could make anything. Give him a chunk of metal, and he could create a razor-sharp sword, or a robotic warrior, or a singing bird bath for your grandmother's garden. Whatever you wanted. The other cabins filled in. Demeter, Apollo, Aphrodite, Dionysus. Naiads came up from the Canoe Lake. Dryad melted out of the trees. From the meadow came a dozen satyrs who reminded me painfully of Grover. I'd always had a soft spot for the satyrs. When they were at camp, they had to do all kinds of odd jobs for Mr. D, the director. But their most important work was out in the real world. They were the campers seeker. They went undercover into schools all over the world, looking for potential half-bloods and escorting them back to camp. That's how I'd met Grover. He had been the first one to recognize I was a demigod. After the satyrs filled in the diner, the hermit's cabin brought up the rear. They were always the biggest cabin. Last summer I had been led by Luke, the guy who saw us with Thalia and Annabeth on top of Half-Blood Hill, for a while, before Poseidon had claimed me. I'd lodged in the hermit's cabin. Luke had befriended me, and then he tried to kill me. Now the hermit's cabin was led by Travis and Connor Stoll. They weren't twins, but they looked so much alike it didn't matter. I could never remember which one was older. They were both tall and skinny, with mops of brown hair that hung in their eyes. They wore orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirts untucked over baggy shorts, and they had those elfish features all Hermes kids had. Upturned eyebrows, sarcastic smiles, a gleam in their eyes whenever they looked at you, like they were about to drop a firecracker down your shirt. I thought it was funny that the god of thieves would have kids with the last name Stoll, but the only time I mentioned it to Travis and Connor, they both stared at me blankly like they didn't get the joke. As soon as the last campers had filled in, I left Tyson in the middle of the pavilion. Conversation faltered, heads turned. Who invited that? Somebody the little cabin murdered. I glared in the direction, but I couldn't figure out who had spoken. From the head table, a familiar voice drawled. Well, well, if it isn't Peter Johnson. My millennium is complete. I gritted my teeth. Percy Jackson, sir. Mr. D sips his Diet Coke. Yes, well, as you young people say these days. Whatever. He was wearing his usual leopard pattern Hawaiian shirt, walking shorts, and tennis shoes with black socks. With his pudgy belly and his blotchy red face, he looked like a Las Vegas tourist who'd stayed up too late in the casinos. Behind him, a nervous-looking satyr was peeling the skins of grapes and handing them to Mr. D one at a time. Mr. D's real name is Dionysus, the god of wine. Zeus appointed him director of Camp Half-Blood to dry out for 100 years, a punishment for chasing some off-limits wood nymph. Next to him, where Chiron usually sat, or stood in centaur form, was someone I'd never seen before, a pale, horribly thin man in a threadbare orange prisoner jumpsuit. The number over his pockets read 0001. He had a blue shadow under his eyes, dirty fingernails, and badly cut gray hair, like his last haircut had been done with a weed whacker. He stared at me. His eyes made me nervous. He looked fractured, angry and frustrated, and hungry all at the same time. This boy, Dionysus told him, you need to watch. Poseidon's child, you know. Ha, the prisoner said, that one. His tone made it obvious that he and Dionysus had already discussed me at length. I'm Tantalus, the prisoner said, smiling coldly. On special assignment here until my lord Dionysus decided to override a new Percy Jackson. I do expect you to refrain from causing any more trouble. Trouble? I demanded. Dionysus snapped his fingers. A newspaper appeared on the table, the front page of today's New York Post. There was my yearbook picture from Meriwether Prep. It was hard for me to make out the headline, but I was pretty good guess that it said something like 13-year-old lunatic tortures gymnasium. Yes, trouble, Tantalus said with satisfaction. He caused plenty of it last summer, I understand. I was too mad to speak. Like it was my fault the gods had almost a civil war. A satyr inched forward nervously and set a plate of barbecue meat in front of Tantalus. The new activities director licked his lips. He looked at his empty goblet and said, Root beer bar special stock 1967. The glass filled itself with foamy soda. Tantalus turned out his hand hesitantly, as if he were afraid the goblet was hot. "Go on, then, old fellow," Dionysus said, a strange sparkle in his eyes. "Perhaps now it will work." Tantalus grabbed for the glass, but it scooted away before he could touch it. A few drops of root beer spilled, and Tantalus tried to dab them with his fingers, but the drops rolled away like quicksilver before he touched them. He growled and turned towards the plate of meat. He picked up a fork and tried to stab a piece of brisket, but the plate skidded down the table and flew off the end, straight into the coals of the brazier. "Blast!" Tantalus muttered. "Oh, well," Dionysus said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Perhaps a few more days. Believe me, my old chap, working at this camp will be torture enough. I'm sure your old curse will eventually fade." "Eventually," muttered Tantalus, staring at Dionysus's Diet Coke. "Do you have any idea how dry one's throat gets after 3,000 years?" "You're that spirit from the Fields of Punishment," I said, "the one who stands in the lake with the fruit tree hanging over you when you can't eat or drink." Tantalus sneered at me. "A real scholar, aren't you, boy? You must have done really horrible when you were alive," I said, mildly impressed. "What was it?" Tantalus' eyes narrowed. Behind him, the satyrs were shaking their heads vigorously, trying to warn me. "I'll be watching you, Percy Jackson," Tantalus said. "I don't want any problems at my camp." "Your camp has problems already, sir." "Oh, go sit down, Johnson," Dionysus said. "I believe that table over there is yours, the one where nobody else ever wants to sit." My face was burning, but I knew better than to talk back. Dionysus was an overgrown brat, but he was an immortal, super powerful, overgrown brat. I said, "Come on, Tyson." "Oh, no," Tantalus said. "The monster says here. We must decide what to do with it." "Him!" I snapped. "His name is Tyson." The new activities director raised an eyebrow. "Tyson saved the camp," I insisted. "He pounded those bronze balls. Otherwise they would burn down this whole place." "Yes," Tantalus said, "and what a pity that would have been." Dionysus snickered. "Leave us," Tantalus ordered, "while we decide this creature's fate." Tyson looked at me with fear in his one big eye, but I knew I couldn't disobey a direct order from the camp directors, not openly anyway. "I'll be right over here, big guy," I promised. "Don't worry, we'll find you a good place to sleep tonight." Tyson nodded. "I believe you. You are my friend," which made me feel a whole lot guiltier. I trudged over to the Poseidon table and slumped onto the bench. A woodman brought me a plate of Olympian olive and pepperoni pizza. I wasn't hungry. I'd been almost killed twice today. I managed to end my school year with a complete disaster. Camp Hamlet was in serious trouble, and Carmen had told me not to do anything about it. I didn't feel very thankful, but I took my dinner, as is customary, up to the bronze brazier and scrapped part of my food up in the flames. "Poseidon," I murmured, "accept my offering. Send me some help while you're at it," I prayed silently. "Please." The smoke from the burning pizza changed into something fragrant. The smell of clean sea breeze with wildfire mixed in it, but I had no idea if that meant my father was really listening. I went back to my sit. I didn't think it could get much worse. But then Tantalus had one of the satyrs blow their corn horns to get our attention for announcements. "Yes, well," Tantalus said, once shaking had died down. "Another fine meal, or so I'm told." As he spoke, he inched his hand towards his refilled dinner plate, as if maybe the food wouldn't notice what he was doing. But it did. It shot away down the table as soon as he got within 20 centimeters. "And here, on my first day of authority," he continued, "I'd like to say what a pleasant form of punishment it is to be here. Over the course of the summer, I hope to to torture or interact with each and every one of you children. You all look good enough to eat. Dionysus clapped politely, leading to some half-hearted applause from the satyrs. Tyson was still standing at the head table, looking uncomfortable, but every time he tried to shut out of the limelight, Tantalus pulled him back. And now some changes. Tantalus gave the campers a crooked grin. We are reinstituting the carriage races. Murmuring broke out on all tables. Excitement, fear, disbelief. Now I know, Tantalus continued, raising his voice, that these races were discontinued some years ago due to, technical problems. 3 deaths and 26 mutilations! Someone at the Apollo table called. Yes, yes, Tantalus said, but I know that you will all join me in welcoming the return of this camp tradition. Golden laurels would go to the winning charioteers. Each month, you may register in the morning. The first race will be held in 3 days' time. We will release you from most of your regular activities to prepare your chariot and choose your horses. And did I mention the victorious team's cabin will have no choice for a month in which they win? An explosion of excitement in conversation. No KP for a whole month? No stable cleaning? Was he serious? Then the last person I expected to object did so. But sir, Clarice said. She looked nervous, but she stood up to speak from the Ares cabin. Some of the campers snickered when they saw the "You Moo Girl" sign on her back. What about patrol duty? I mean, if you drop everything to ready our chariot. Ah, the hero of the day, Tantalus exclaimed. Brave Clarice, who single-handedly blasted the bronze bulls. Clarice blinked, then blushed. I didn't. And modest, too, Tantalus grinned. Not to worry, my dear, this is summer camp. We are here to enjoy ourselves, yes? But the tree, and now, Tantalus said, as several of Clarice's cabin mates pulled her back into her seat. Before we proceed to the campfire sing-along, one slight housekeeping issue. Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase have seen fit for some reason to bring this here. Tantalus waved a hand towards Tyson. Uneasy murmuring spread among the campers. A lot of sideways looks at me. I wanted to kill Tantalus. Now, of course, he said, Sacklers had a reputation for being bloodthirsty monsters with a very small brain capacity. Under normal circumstances, I would release this beast into the woods and have you hunt you and down perhaps torches and pointed sticks. But who knows? Perhaps Sackler is not as horrible as most of his brethren. Until it proves worthy of distraction, we need a place to keep it. I thought about the stables, but that will make the horses nervous. Hermit's cabin, possibly? Silence at the Hermit's table. Travis and Connor still developed a silent interest in the tablecloth. I couldn't blame them. The Hermit's cabin was always full of bursting. There was no way they could take in 2-meter Cyclops. Come now, Tantalus shouted. The monster may be able to do some menial chores. Any suggestion as to where such a beast could be nailed? Suddenly, everyone gasped. Tantalus scooted away from Tyson in surprise. All I could do was stare in disbelief at the brilliant green light that was about to change my life. A dazzling holographic image had appeared above the Tyson head. With a sickening twist in my stomach, I remembered what Annabeth had said about Cyclops. There are children, nature, spirits, and gods. Well, one god in particular, usually. Swirling over Tyson's head was a glowing green trident. The same symbol that had appeared above me the day Poseidon had claimed me as his son. There was a moment of awed silence. Being claimed was a rare event. Some campers waited in vain for it their whole lives. When I'd been claimed by Poseidon last summer, everybody had reverently knelt. But now, they followed Tantalus's lead. Tantalus roared with laughter. Well, I think we know where to put the beast now, by the gods. I can see the family resemblance. Everybody laughed, except Annabeth and a few of my other friends. Tyson didn't seem to notice. He was too mystified trying to swat the glowing trident that was now fading over his head. He was too innocent to understand how much they were making fun of him, how cruel people were all. But I got it. I had a new cabin mate. I had a master, or a half brother. And that is it for chapter 5. So, if you don't remember, Poseidon is the parent of all the Cyclops. Tantalus. If you don't know the myth of Tantalus, is that so there are two versions of the myth. So the first one is that he invited the gods for dinner, and he was thinking of something to give them proper. So he decided to kill his own son and stew him in a stew. This being a very bad thing in ancient Greece. His punishment in the underworld was to be in a lake with a fruit tree above his head, but he couldn't eat or drink. The second version was that he tried to steal some ambrosia and nectar from the gods. Again, it was the same punishment. Me, to be honest, I preferred the version where they were both. And in the first case, he was pardoned, and then the second one, he was killed. Anyway, so Tantalus really likes Clarice, which will be bad. And I'm just not gonna spoil. So I hope you like this chapter, and I'm seeing you guys next time. Bye!